Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this overheated tent in Aix-en-Provence. Obviously, we're all used to it. Everybody has their bottle of water or their fan to try and hold for the whole time of a conference, which should be very animated because we've covered topics like housing, mobility, and it is true that now lifelong training is very important. I wouldn't say to fight against unemployment because we have almost no unemployment apparently in France these days. But in order to restore value to the training of people throughout their life. Before I give the floor to Nathalie Chusseau, the economist, professor at the University of Lille, and she holds the chair of economic transition in the Institut Bachelier. We have with us Alain Roumillac, President of Manpower France, Dominique Restineau, who is President of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Paris and Île-de-France, Florence Parly, former Minister of the Army, and recently you were designated as chairperson of the board of CNAM, which is the National Conservatory for Arts and for Arts et Métiers, and Cyril Malargé, CEO of Soprasteria, one of the European leaders in digital council, and Mrs. Segal, who is Director General of the campus of Paris Dauphine in Tunis. So, we have 55 minutes for discussion. Obviously, we'll try to keep some time for questions from the audience. I would like to thank all those who are here and those who are following throughout the world and via streaming. Without further ado, Nathalie Chusseau, a brief introduction of the topic, how can lifelong education be enhanced? And then you'll all have a few minutes. Thank you. By way of introduction, I would say that the job market in France is doing well. Unemployment rate around 7%, and employment rate very high, one of the highest since the 70s. But all this is in a world of what I would call radical transformation. Digital revolution, AI are going to modify considerably the job structure. We feel that 39% of employees have a strong risk of seeing their job automated. And the recent study by Goldman Sachs are saying that AI might destroy 325 million jobs in the world, including a large part in Europe. Then there are the challenges of decarbonation by 2050 that might destroy jobs and create jobs. And then there's a demographic transition that is going to change the number of jobs in the care for dependent people and elderly people. So, jobs are going to be destroyed, others are going to be created, and we have to adapt to the skills because demand is constantly changing. Apart from that, apparently, we have a scarcity of workers in some areas. All this in a context where 80,000 youngsters drop out of school every year. So it seems that lifelong training is absolutely necessary to protect against the obsolescence of qualifications, to develop skills and to adapt constantly to the ever-changing labor market. So this is a tool that is absolutely necessary for employers and workers. But every year in France, only 32% of French workers take part in training that is related to work. This leads to an issue of funding of vocational training. The regions are taking a large part in that. And there's considerable change with apprenticeship, as now we have more or less 1 million apprentices. But companies have a large role to play, as training has to take place at all ages in life to prepare for professional transitions and to anticipate for change of jobs or reconversion. So how can we move companies to invest more in the development of their workers' skills? Must we make lifelong training obligatory or compulsory for companies and workers? What can we do to continuously apply to an ever-changing market? What about the soft skills? And how can we adapt lifelong training to the job journey at all ages in life? So these are the questions. Well, a very nice presentation of the landscape. Well, manpower now. Alain Roumillac, as I was saying, manpower supports companies in their daily life for the changes in their work, and this requires a constant adaptation. Well, yes, this has led to a constant transformation. It forces us to anticipate, as you said. I believe that the transformations that we're facing mean that a number of companies are going to face a wall in terms of skills, so they are to think about qualifying their workers. What projects can I develop to make sure I have the right skills? How can I change the skills, and what are the means I'm putting into this? Sometimes, as I talk to corporate managers who are announcing huge investments, I'm very struck by the fact that when we ask them how much money they're going to devote to the training part, they are surprised. And when I say, well, do you think that if you invest $1 billion, 3%, let's say 30 million would be a good figure? Maybe the companies will have to fund more, and the state will have to better use its money on this topic. And the second aspect I would like to mention is the idea of reducing unemployment from 7 to 5%. At 7%, almost all employable people have a job. So we're going to have to train massively the people whom we want to insert. We have to be able to support them, to help them have an idea of what they're going to do, to help them train once they have defined a project. I believe that at present, all too often do we say to people, well, let's train you and you'll see what you want to do afterwards. So we have to do the reverse. And we'll see what the law contains. We'll see how they are able to support the job seekers and give them access to the training they need to correspond to the needs of companies. Thank you for being so concise. Let's all continue along those lines so that the audience has more time for questions. Dominique Restino, let me remind everyone that you're the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Paris and Île-de-France. So you support companies in their daily life. Can you buy into this lifelong training? How is it possible? Well, hello, thank you for coming to listen to us because in view of the time and in view of the weather, it's very hot here. Every year we train 72,000 people in our Chamber of Commerce. I tend to say 42,000 for initial training, including 19,000 apprentices and 30,000 for vocational training. But what I'm saying now that the educational group of the Chamber of Commerce of Paris-Île-de-France are training 72,000 people in vocational training throughout life. What I mean is that lifelong training doesn't start when you're 45. It starts when you're small, when you're a child. And this is why this leads me to the question you're asking. How can we enhance the lifelong education? I don't want it to be enhanced. I want people to buy into it. I want it to be part of I want it to be accepted in society. Earlier on, in another room, we talked about what choice of society for tomorrow. We talked a lot about environmentalism and ecology, and I agree with that, but I believe that the main transformation of our society and societies will be lifelong education. And through this lifelong education, we have made a lot of effort. We have 14 schools. There's ESCP is a school of the Chamber of Commerce, ECP as well. Les Gobelins also, which is the best cinema school, or a school of French gastronomy. So the important thing is that for the past 2 centuries, the Chamber of Commerce of Paris-Île-de-France is changing schools, creating programs, creating new curricula, and developing training, because we train the men and women that companies need. And I would say it's even more, because today, through training, we have trainings that do not lead, that are long and lead to a diploma, but we also have very short trainings. And we have some trainings that enable people who have less time to be able to learn and to learn throughout their life. Over the past few months, we've been talking a lot about preparation for retirement. We now say that from the age of 53, you're a senior. I've been a senior for a while, I know that, but maybe we should change that age, because after all, the idea of health is to live longer and better, and the key might be lifelong training. We were talking about cuisine, and you will tell us what you have in your drawers. Mrs. Florence Parly, you are the new chairperson of the chairperson of the board of CNAM. You just started in these functions, so you're just discovering what it's all about. But I guess you have an overall idea of the topic and a few specific ideas, if only about the fact that you work with companies through apprenticeships. You have to mobilize companies now. Yes, I would like to say that apart from being a chairperson of the board of this great establishment, which is totally unique, I was lucky enough to take part in 2 governments that defined VAE, which is and also a law on professional training that helped apprenticeship develop. So, as you said, learning is something that evolves. A great number of jobs are not filled in because we lack people with the right qualifications, and the job market evolves because we are in a situation where things are moving very fast. The situation is almost full employment, and the idea is to have an initial training that will correspond to the needs of companies and the needs of the economy. Talking about the people who do not have a job, it's important to be able to supply and to offer the right support to help them return to job or to employability. And I could tell you more about this because at the Ministry of the Armies, I had a great experience. And then the people who CNAM takes care of are also people who already have a job and need to evolve. First of all, because they wish to, and here you talk about the social ladder, because you need to have a will, but they're also corporate workers or companies that need their workers to adapt to the jobs of tomorrow. As you heard, there's a number of essential public policies that are being revived, the need to organize the environmental transition so that we have green industries that will enable us to create new industries, to decarbonate the existing ones. We need people in the health sector, in the energy sector. I would like to say that the nuclear sector is losing a whole generation with people retiring that represent a huge know-how. So we are giving a new impetus to this sector, and we'll have to recruit 100,000 new people in the nuclear sector to provide for the needs. So we already have quite a lot of bottlenecks, but we have to make sure that we supply the critical jobs that are necessary in the critical sectors. In the Rencontre économique d'Aix-en-Provence, there's a lot of companies present, and I would like to say that we, people who are in charge of creating trainings and curricula that correspond to the needs of companies, we need the companies, because who better than them could define the needs? This co-construct of training programs must, first of all, consider the topic, which are the skills that are necessary. Also, you must also cater for very short-term needs, not only engineers who are trained over a period of 6 years, but people who can be trained in a very short term. And now we have a lot of remote training, and the combination of all this will enable us to prepare for the future. I don't want to take more of your time, but this is the mission of CNAM and other organizations. But for that, if we want to remain pertinent, we must have a pertinent dialogue with companies. Well, we'll come back to that, Mrs. Parly. Cyril Malargé, you're CEO of Soprasteria. Today, as the various speakers have shown and told us, we're facing extreme changes, AI, energy transition. All this represents quite a lot of possibilities and challenges. Lifelong training, in your opinion, is it necessary to work in-house and train your own teams? This is an important point, I guess, of your management at Soprasteria. Yes, first of all, hello everyone. Thank you for being here despite the heat. I would like to pick up what Florence said, because we're both very aware of what's at stake. Today, companies are facing huge challenges that of transformation. I'm not going back to the environmental issues, the automation, competitiveness, global competitiveness, attractiveness, and this ability to get the loyalty and to retain the best talents. All this is linked to the skills, and this skill challenge is absolutely essential. You gave a number of elements, but I want to add to what you said. And 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 do not exist just yet. 50% of hard skills have a life cycle of less than 5 years. And even more in my job, which is technology. So initial training gives you a starting base, but it's not enough for your career. And companies have to manage skills in a dynamic manner. Skills are a flow, something that flows, that changes, and there's also something that has to come from the workers, because getting trained also means making an effort on their part. I don't want to give people any lessons, and I will remain very humble, but I want to say that at Sopra Steria, we are 60,000 engineers and consultants. Every year we recruit 10,000 new people, and almost 8% of of the whole wage mass goes into training. So, soft skills, supporting efforts, trusting, and going from training to learning. When you talk about soft skills, what is it? Ability to synthesize, learning to learn, leadership, creativity. Let's talk about AI. The right use, the proper use of AI does not require any technological skills. You need to have a critical mind, the ability to ask the right questions, and the ability to reason critically as to the result given by the machine. You have to trust also. Trusting people is going further. I recommend giving free access to all staff to the list of training and the tools. But that's not enough. The role of a company is to encourage and give more importance to training. So we are still learning, but in June, for example, we decided that June would be the learning month. So every worker, all 60,000 of them, received some learning content in their mailbox in the form of articles, video clips, or whatever, to make them want to learn. And the last point is that it's not enough to train people. You have to apply what you've learned very quickly. Otherwise, the money is lost, the personal investment is lost, and the role of employers is to organize the staging and the development. And to end up, because we only have 4 minutes, well, you'll get more afterwards. But to me, the companies that succeed are the ones that understand that skills have to be at the very core of their strategy. Those who stake money on the skills of their staff and have a kind of compact with their staff will succeed. But in my opinion, it's all in the execution of things, in the implementation. Amina Zegal, you're the Director General of the campus of Tunis of the University Paris Dauphine. Very soon we'll turn to the international world, but how do you see the relationship, the connection between university and companies? Well, I would like to start by a question. Would you ask your doctor to prescribe a drug that enables you to remain in good health throughout your life and to avoid stress? In the same way, you cannot ask for a university diploma to guarantee your job throughout your life. Everybody knows now that they have to train throughout their lives to remain competitive, agile, and competent. We all know that 25% of the jobs are going to change in the next 25 years, as you said earlier. Technical skills in the 70s used to last 40 years. Now they don't last more than 18 months. And companies are aware of that. And at the very core of their strategy, they have training and investment in training. in the same way as they look at the automation of processes. They trust that they can train their staff, but what they're afraid of is the scarcity of skills, the volatility of workers, which is why you have to train better and more efficiently and more people. The Tunis campus is considered as an educational accelerator. We decided to go from the status of training or content provider to training accelerator. This is done by supporting companies, offering solutions to companies to help them retain their managers, to help them increase the skills or further the increase in skills of their managers. A few years ago, we didn't have a lifelong training department, and now it represents 30% of our revenue, and we want to develop it even more, thanks in particular to an investment into the techno-training. For example, we have a program called U-Jobs, U as in university. The idea is to work hand in hand with companies to attract talent and to develop the employer's brand on the campus. For example, the companies will fund deserving students who haven't got the means to study. So this is to show that we consider it's absolutely essential to adapt very quickly and to develop some agility, to work together with companies, especially via lifelong training. In order to do that, we need to work in close cooperation with them. And we must also think about how we can develop things together and share the right vision. So this, in fact, satisfies some specific demands, probably, but you're also expecting specific solutions from university or companies. Alain Roumillac, coming back to you, about the involvement of companies in practice. How can we convince companies to invest more in training, and with what means? Because we have the tools, they have a toolbox. What is your toolbox?
I think that enterprises have fully understood that it's very complicated to find the skills they need on the market. No doubt the market linked to the economic situation will be less tense at the end of the year and beginning of next year, but currently things are very complicated. So I think the companies have understood that in a large number of cases they have to anticipate. They need to hire people with potential and train them in order to have the people they need in order to succeed as a company, to succeed with production and to continue to grow. Companies have to accept that they won't overnight find the skills they need on the market. So that means you have to think forward, you have to anticipate. You bring people into the company and you have to accept that they will need training. It's something we've somewhat forgotten. And there's the second topic, as I mentioned in my introduction, we have to be able to look at the future. We have to look at the not 10 or 15 years ahead, because that's pretty unpredictable, but on the whole, each company over the next 2 or 5 years knows basically where it wants to head, because it has transformation projects. We talk about decarbonization. The investments required will span several years or maybe even a decade. So we know that within 3 years, we know which projects for decarbonation will be required, which digital projects will be set up. And we can understand the impact on skills, therefore, so we can therefore anticipate. Anticipation is particularly important because we're working with people. Changing skills and changing behaviors takes time. We have to act at the level of each individual. We say to our customers that they need to have a macroeconomic approach. How are things going to evolve? And then each individual has to be able to look forward. What is the ability of the person to learn? And do they really want to learn? And that is what defines the kind of job that you can reposition these people in. Those who evolve a lot and are highly motivated can jump ahead. Those who progress less well will have to be positioned in jobs where they don't need so much more training. When we support companies in this area, a lot of people say, well, maybe my skills aren't needed in this company, maybe they're needed elsewhere. And in that case, you know what, rather than changing skills, I'd rather change company. So you have to adapt skills in companies. How can you do this in the company itself? There are structures which are encouraged by the law, the CFA, these training in the company. Is that worthwhile when it comes to working at each individual level? I'd like to put this question to Dominique. With the companies you work with in commerce and industry, well, it's quite something to manage a trainee. So we support companies in this area. I'd like to revert to one point. I've heard a lot of interesting things, but it's not just the companies that need to look forward. It's not just the employees who need to evolve. It's not just a problem of the unemployment agency. It's not just the problem of the unemployed. It's everyone's problem. Companies know full well that they have a problem. They have a problem because they need to recruit for tomorrow morning, for next month, or next year. And in fact, I'm sorry, I think that to answer the question, we need to look forward by 15, 20, 25 years. We need to have a clear vision. Why? 87% of companies have less than 20 employees. It's mainly the big companies that use the training schemes because they're well organized. And that's what is of fundamental importance. The bosses of very small companies, well, the chambers of commerce helps the tradesmen and small or medium-sized companies. They represent half of the ongoing training budget. And if it's not the whole of society and all the stakeholders who are concerned, we'll never be able to improve the situation and really make the most of ongoing learning and training. Regions, cities, the state. I say that for me, we have the environmental issue, global warming, as Florence was saying. We need to train people here, there, and elsewhere. All these sectors of activity need training throughout the year, and that's what's going to transform our society, I think. We have very pragmatic CEOs with us. People talk about economics not being within the realm of politics. We have to look forward a long way. We can start on a small scale and then ramp up. In the long-term vision, you need very short training courses, probably. How do you work on that? That's what was said earlier on. Look, in retraining, I see a lot of 30 years old who've gone through wonderful schools, and they want to retrain to work in cooking, for example, because they are passionately interested in it. They're going to open up a restaurant or a whole restaurant chain. They are rethinking their job. This is a reconversion that can happen throughout one's life. Do you think that companies have truly understood what's at stake in terms of ongoing training, lifelong training? You're in contact with your partners all the time. What's your feeling? Are companies mainly aware of the need for lifelong learning? It's hard to make a general statement, as we have said. Big companies have understood the importance of this issue. And a lot of big companies didn't wait to create training structures in-house. They have in-company universities to continue to train employees throughout their professional career. The possibility of accessing ongoing training is perceived as attractive for young people who are joining a company, and also it's a way to boost loyalty amongst headcount. So yes, big companies, I think, have fully understood the issue. We have a very nice example in CNAM with collaboration with MBDA. This is a partnership which enables technicians to become engineers, high school leaving diploma +5 in a couple of years. Of course, this calls on a lot of willpower among the individuals concerned, but it also calls for a lot of support from the company. You have to give the employee time, encourage the employee, rather than making the person think that this is a waste of time. So it's a real investment. The issue is that for smaller companies, you have to get them to become aware of the importance of training. I'm talking about CNAM. That's what you're here for. CNAM is present in 230 places in France, and I think one of our assets, I hope my neighbor won't contradict me, is that local structures work very closely with the socio-economic world and the chambers of commerce. Why? It's the local socio-economic world that can best determine what the needs are at the level of an employment catchment area. So as I said, you have to tailor-make things. You have to go into the finer details in the various territories. And our 230 locations are in very medium-sized cities, and this rounds off government action. It's very important to be able to reach out to these young people and less young people. You don't just have online training, you can round this off with all sorts of contact. So I think the more tense the labor market, the less easy it is for employers to find skills, the more we have a window of opportunity, and we hope it will last for a long time. This may be a sign that full employment is present. We have a window to convince companies that there are interlocutors, not just CNAM, there are interlocutors who are here to meet their needs, providing there is a real dialogue and that we can exchange on all these topics. We have this direct relationship between the university and companies as well. Same issue. Yes, indeed. Companies can anticipate their future needs for skills. They can reflect on their strategy, put this at the core of their strategy for the next 5 years. In fact, when they come to see educational professionals, they want something immediate. They want almost immediate skills. They're very careful about the return on investment when buying training. So how should one react to all this? Obviously, today we talk increasingly about nimbleness. We talk about internationalization as well. I'd like to talk about Dauphine. In my case, Dauphine decided to set up its first international campus in Tunis to be close to international companies based in Africa. The goal of the model is to train to benefit from all the Paris-based skills and adapt this to the region while adding a local layer. Cyril, in terms of training, how can you recruit the right colleagues, the right employees? Do you have an in-house strategy? Do you work directly with universities, for example? That indeed is essential for the company. You have to put up the requisite means. Training entails a lot of investment, and you have to believe in training in the long term. It's not enough just to provide one course. Situations are very diverse, very varied. I know this is true on our campus. You need to have long-lasting relationships with schools and universities. Every year we have over 500 activities carried out in schools and universities. We also hire a lot of trainees and train them. So yes, indeed, we need young people who want training. We're not saying that they all have to be ready to be employed. We want people to have a well-rounded education. What works at one point may be outdated 2 years later. So we need to have trained people who can evolve and who can learn in the future a new technology, a new job, and so on. Before I give the floor to the room and draw some conclusions, we have Dominique who's here. But Madame Paris, I'd like you to backtrack a bit as the Minister of the Army. The Army is very specific. I think that you train 26,000 young people. You recruited 26,000 young people who have no school-leaving diplomas. Others are highly qualified. You train them, and when they leave the Army, they're fully trained. Can that be exported to the private sector? We have to be very quick. Well, in a nutshell, why do we do this? We recruit 26,000 young people every year. That's a huge number who have all sorts of different skills. The reason is that the French Army provides employment as a sort of a flow. Every year, an equivalent number of soldiers leave the Army. So that means that we have to be able constantly to attract young people. One of the reasons why you can attract young people is this commitment to provide training. Some people dream of becoming a soldier when they're very young, but others have no initial qualifications. They say to themselves, well, I'll learn something if I join the Army, which will serve me later on. And it's true that the Army invests hugely in training young people. That's why we have contracts with these young people. We have they sign a 5-year contract to invest for 5 years and then to have to start all over again because they leave to join competition. Well, we try to boost loyalty a little bit, but not too much because they have to remain young, alert, and fit to be in the Army. And also, our promise must be kept. That is, military staff who return to civilian life have to have the right skills. So while they're in the Army, we need to give them recognized skills. And that calls for two things. First of all, we train these young people while they're at the Army, and we also, when they leave the Army, try to find them jobs. So it's like an employment agency. We reclassify every year about 13,000 people because not everyone needs this institution to find a job. And also I'd like to stress that we help military who leave the Army and also their spouses. So thank you to the French Army. I'd like to pay tribute to the Army. It is indeed a fantastic way to provide training. People learn a job. People learn all sorts of things in the Army. But quite frankly, there is a process here that can indeed provide ideas when it comes to reconversion. In the Chambers of Commerce, in our partnership with the Army, we also learn a great deal. We train employees, and we can help companies with the Chamber of Commerce in this area. We give training also to CEOs. Please be very quick. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to go back to what was said. Soft skills. When I recruit someone who's spent time with the Army, I have a guarantee of value, which I can firmly believe in. That's a fundamental guarantee. Companies can learn a great deal from this. This kind of teaching should be exported to the private sector. If we continue to have full employment, then we will need to succeed with the employability of those who are the least employable. There are some in the army. I would like to invite everyone to visit the Fontenelle-le-Comte Regiment. We have adapted to the military professional training system. It's the AFA who comes to the regiment, and furthermore, look what the military service overseas does. 88% of these young people who quit school can find jobs when they finish with the army. So it's a question of supervision in the long term and supervision in terms of the number of adults who work with these young people. It's a wonderful commitment. How do you currently train young people in new technologies? How do you react to this? Is it positive? This way of does it help to get people onto the job market? Indeed, we try to reinsert a number of people in the job market. We share this vision. Indeed, we have to provide more support to people who are a long way from the job market. In our country, we give benefits, unemployment benefits, rather than support. We need to support people. There are a lot of people who have the will, they don't know how to go about it. And we have to help them to choose a job and then to go for training, learn certain basic skills. And if we do that kind of thing, I think we'll be able to get a lot of people far from the job market back into a job. A quick conclusion, and then we'll give the floor to the room. We'll thus be able to go deeper into certain matters. Well, just a few points. We have to work in employment catchment areas, the territory and companies in the territory, chambers of commerce, support in small and medium-sized companies, that's a key issue. Support for employees, the motivation of employees is of course very important. We need to propose short training courses to meet immediate needs and make people rapidly operational. Support companies to show them how important training is. It's not just a cost, it's actually an investment. Establish long-lasting relationships with schools and universities. The importance of soft skills. We don't need colleagues right away. Train people in young companies, draw inspiration from the army, and at a time of full employment, we need to ensure that the people the furthest removed from the job market get jobs. Well, you deserve a round of applause, but things aren't over yet. Just raise your hand and then you'll get a microphone. I'm not saying I can give everyone the floor. Who wants to speak? Please introduce yourself very quickly and ask a very short question so that we can take lots of questions and answers. Gilles Berfond. I used to work in the aeronautical industry. Excellent work is done by CNAM and the Chambers of Commerce, but there's someone who's absent, namely national education. The national education system bears huge responsibility when it comes to adapting skills. It would be interesting to see what you think about the national education system. The issue is that we know that people who leave the French educational system are not necessarily very adaptable. The skills aren't very suitable in terms of what companies need. The basic raw material, if I may say, is not at the right standard. One or two issues here. First of all, apprenticeship is hugely successful, but apprenticeship is mainly for those with a school-leaving diploma. The national education must force itself, together with companies, to train young people before the school-leaving diploma, teach them technical jobs, industrial jobs, teach them about restaurants and other things like that. In terms of reindustrialization and ecological transition and digital transition, we won't succeed in this area if we don't have more people who take up the sciences. We have to massively increase the number of engineers we train. These are 2 points And if we do this in the short term, then we'll be able better to respond to companies' needs. We have a school, the CIT, dedicated to cybersecurity and digital areas. Yes, indeed, we train 19,000 young people at the Chamber of Commerce in these areas every year. Do you know how many apprenticeship contracts are broken? It's 28 to 30%. In other words, you try to put a young person in contact with a company, and by month 2 or 3, the person says he wants to quit, and that's quite disastrous, both for young people and for the company, but for young people above all. So this represents a huge cost. We try to include 91% of young people after 11 months really join the company. And it's only 5 to 7% of young people who quit. We put up a lot of means to ensure that we give support both to companies and these young people. We'll come and see you. Quality is what enables us to really provide skills to these young people. We need to work with the national education system, but I don't think we should judge it. Would you like to say a few quick words? In fact, in terms of the national education system, it's important to consider the digital transformation, which should also be part and parcel of the overall strategy. Jehadi, I assist people at home. I have 4 diplomas and a school-leaving diploma. You talked a lot about companies, but now with digital technologies, we need to talk about services too. I work with the CESU system. Sometimes we don't need to have a company. We just need the administration to stop thinking that it must direct everything. It has to put its trust in us. I wanted to raise this point because we need all these people, including self-employed. A lot can be done in terms of household help and using the CESU scheme. We'll stop there. The gentleman behind, and then we'll have one last question. I have a very quick question. We talked a lot about certain matters, but how can ongoing learning help to retain talent already in a company? This is a topic that's at the heart of company concern. These companies invest in training their headcount, and they don't want people to leave the company, obviously. Often what we observe is that people are sent for training, and then people, as of the next day, can't apply immediately what they've learned. This may last for a week, 1 week, or 3 weeks, and then people feel that they may want to leave. So if you want to retain young people, of course it's difficult to set up, but you need to be able to train people and then organize things in such a way that people can apply their skills in the company. That's of fundamental importance. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we can't take the last question, but you'll be able to discuss matters together. We now have to close the session because there are other sessions which will now take place. Thank you very much for your participation. I thank our speakers and thank the audience.